people are yearning for a sense of community.
Yeah.
You know, there's a loneliness epidemic in this country, in modern life in general. COVID made that worse.
Yeah.
I really think life enrichment is something we need to do a better job of.
Welcome to Season 7 of Bridge the Gap, a podcast dedicated to informing, educating, and influencing the future of housing and services for seniors. Powered by sponsors AccuShield, Align, Nick Map Vision, ProCare HR, Sage, Hamilton Captel, ServiceMaster, The Bridge Group Construction, and Solinity, and produced by Solinity Marketing.
Welcome to Bridge the Gap Podcast, this senior living podcast with Josh and Lucas here in Washington, D.C. at the Fall NIC Conference. We have a great guest on today. We've got Chris Hollister, CEO of Pegasus. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. Nice to be with you today.
Yes, actually, welcome back. Probably 3-4 years ago now, our original podcast with Chris. We had a couple of audio issues, but it's still produced. But this is going to be the better version of it because we're going to get a market update and some thoughts on an industry pioneer. Chris, you started when you were actually young. People say that, I started when I was 5. You started young in your career. And that little bit of history before we dive into kind of current market trends, I find very interesting because your foray into senior housing is a little bit unique. And then you kind of took some time off and then came back in. Tell us that story.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Lucas. So I've been in the industry since 1986. Native Texan, Texas A&M undergrad. I went to business school at Duke Business School, came back, went into banking for about a year. And my dad one day called me on a landline and said, Chris, you know what's about to hit the fan. If you can get out of banking, you should. So I started looking around, and Greystone was moving from New York. They were not called Greystone yet. And this is the senior living developer operator, not the mortgage company. And I went in 1986 as a financial analyst for Greystone. Great group of people. Shout out to Paul Steinhoff and Mike Lanahan, John Spooner, Mark Andrews, those guys. I learned so much from them. And assisted living was really new. And we were doing CCRCs, but assisted living was just filling up. And so Mike Doyle, who was there, he said, I'm going to move to Boston and start a company that just does assisted living. Really, the only group out there in a big way was Sunrise. So we were very early. I mean, I helped organize the first symposium on assisted living in New England. And we had Paul and Terry Clausen come up. That was 1990 or 1991. So, this, I don't know, maybe my 25th, 30th NIC. I mean, it's part of my life, and you get to see friends, and it's been quite a journey.
Well, that's just the little precursor.
That's a little precursor. You want me to keep going?
Yeah, I do want you to keep going because if you would be willing to, I'd love for you to tell the story of your kind of rise in the cell and then how you came back to the table.
Well, so I moved to Boston in 1990 to help start the Standish Care Company, and we did this little IPO in 1991. It was the first freestanding assisted living company to go public. It didn't raise enough money. It was just kind of a crazy. It was on the NASDAQ. The IPO blew up. That's a whole side story. And we were public for 28 minutes when they pulled the plug. So that was a bad day. That's what you call a bad day. But then we redid it. We raised more money to cover the cost of that. That's a whole side story. But Standish was a pioneer, and sometimes you strike gold and sometimes you don't. And but I think we were innovative and raised the awareness of assisted living. I learned how the world works, how you raise money, and I wrote a business plan. I moved to North Carolina, where my wife's from, and wrote a business plan, which what became Southern Assisted Living with Steve Morton, Rich Williams, Roger Harper, a lot of wonderful people. It wasn't just me. And we developed the Carolina House platform, which was assisted living and memory care under the same roof in 1995, 1996. That was a really radical idea at the time. People are like, why are you doing that? Memory care is totally different. I go, no, it's not. I've been doing this for like 5 years. I think this makes sense. We went to the Alzheimer's Association, Alice Watkins in North Carolina, and said, you probably get asked this all the time, but would you help us design this? You go, well, no one's ever asked us. And we designed a beautiful circular path so people could wander freely with a trellis, Southern style outdoor garden, kind of an Elizabethan formal garden. And we filled all those up. It went great. We bought out Hunt Assisted Living, and then we were the largest operator in the Southeast. And that was 1995 to 2006, had that company in North Carolina. We had about 43 buildings. Most of them, I think 39 of them were in North Carolina. So we were the largest operator in North Carolina by a factor of 3, and got bought out by Brookdale. And you referenced my exit. It wasn't a federal indictment or anything. We'd been to New Zealand and we liked it. And I decided to move my family to New Zealand. Both our girls went to high school there. We have dual citizenship now. I was in New Zealand for 5 years. Some folks found my background. I went on the board of a senior living operator. They call them retirement villages there. It's all IL. And, you understand that it's really, you got to understand a society to understand what to do in business. And home health care is paid by the government. So assisted living has never had the traction. There's some freestanding memory care now and some more sophisticated care options on the assisted living front, but it's mainly more of a lifestyle, more like what we would call IL, right? Independent living. Became chair of the board of that company. It was called Vision Senior Living. And as you know, I did a few other businesses there. I got involved in ecotourism. I have EcoZip Adventures. We have 2 locations now. I met some young guys have one pizza shop called Sal's Pizza. We have 50 locations now, mainly in New Zealand, but also in Australia. And I still spend time in New Zealand. It's a wonderful part of the world if you've never been. And I would put it on your list because it is beautiful. But my girls wanted to go to university here, family, and frankly got a little restless, wanted to do something and moved back in 2012 and went on the board of Sunrise. Welltower had just purchased a minority share of Sunrise and went on that board for about 5 years. And then they asked Steve and Vic and I to take over some communities. And we did that in 2018, 2019. And Steve and Vic co-founded it with me, but then I bought him out. He had a few health problems. I don't think he minds me saying. He's been pretty open about it, but he's better now. He's skiing a lot more than I am. I just saw him this summer. He's playing pickleball and doing great. He's a Hall of Fame guy in the sector and a pioneer. And so we're still friends. It's all good. And we've had Pegasus for about 5.5 years, I guess, 6 years, really.
I think that's great context. That is a great segue into talking about the current state. And as you know, Chris, there's a lot of new people in senior housing. And one of my loves and passions is preserving the history of our industry because, and you and I have talked about this, the senior living industry is young comparatively, at least in my opinion, to other verticals such as multifamily or commercial real estate or, residential homes. The senior living industry is a young industry and there's a lot of new people. And I think preserving the history of the people the core people that really got this industry started, to me is very fascinating. And it's a privilege to have that, as, forever content on the Bridge the Gap network. Yeah. So that said, you and I have talked and you've had a lot of conversations here at Nick. There seems to be a better attitude. I think, certainly the senior living industry, it has not arrived yet. There's still a lot of challenges. We talked about the demographics, the boom. And you and I have talked about kind of supply and demand. There's times where you've said, no, there's oversupply, but then we look at some of the Nick Map Vision data and they're saying there's not enough supply. Can you help unpack that for us?
Sure. Well, number one, thank you guys for doing what you're doing with this podcast. I think it's an important part of the media landscape in senior living. So good on you, as they would say in New Zealand. That's a New Zealand expression. Good on you. When I was trying to raise money for assisted living with Standish Care Company in 1991, I would go into private equity groups, and we probably educated half the private equity groups at the time on there's this thing, and you tell them what we were doing, and they would give you what I call a golden retriever look. The kind of turn they didn't know what we were talking about. They mean like, you mean a nursing home? No. You mean like my grandmother's in a HUD house? No. I mean it's an intermediate thing. And how many times in your life do you get to be part of a whole new industry that we are all part of? And it's great that you have the old people like me and the pioneers. It's great that you have all this new energy coming in. At times, it's been a bit of an irrational exuberance. Like the silver tsunami has been overhyped. And if you look at the Nick Map data that you referenced, this is a long segue answer to get to your point on the mood. But really, Eric Morton and what they do at Vision Map is show the supply and demand. They have this one slide where we were overshooting demand from 2013 to 2019 every year by 50% or even double. I mean, overall in the country. In some Sunbelt markets like Atlanta and Dallas, it was worse than that, right? Because land's easy. COVID hit, net demand actually went negative, but there was still stuff under construction, right? So they couldn't stop it. It's already under construction. So we were still oversupplied in the early 20s, but now it has totally shifted where you're starting to see the demand creep up for the early part of the baby boomer. But the baby boomers after World War II, it really is 2026, 2027. I'll give you a stat. I won't be exactly right, but the annual demand or growth in the 80 plus population in this country over 20 years averages like 1.2 to 1.4%. Eric Morton could call into the show and correct me, but that's about right. And then so we're building, the inventory is growing like 2% a year, 2.5% or even 3% a year versus that 1.2 to 1.4. Well, now in I think this year it's growing 3.3%. And a lot of this new supply is starting to dry up. So next year, I don't think there's going to be much more new supply coming in. 2026, virtually nothing, because unless we were building it now, it ain't happening. And in 2027, this 80 plus population grows by 7.3% in 1 year. In 1 year. So it has never been more, I don't think, than 2%. It has averaged 1.2 to 1.4. It is going to be 7.3. It is going to be 5x the demand in 1 year that we've ever seen. Now, when I was on your show, you guys showed 4 years ago, whatever it was, I said senior living is not really going to start booming until the Stones go off tour. I don't know if you remember I said that, until the Rolling Stones stop touring. But Mick is like, I don't know, man. The guy's like a machine. I mean, you know, good on him. Willie Nelson just produced his 75th album, and he's 91. So, I mean, I think that's what this industry needs to be all about, is this vibrancy, and that you can come into assisted living and still make music or do whatever you were doing. You're just getting the help you need. But I do think the mood here is much better than it was last year. I mean, last year it was just doom and gloom, a lot of capital problems on the balance sheet side, a lot of slower lease ups and plan. And really the whole fallout, that's coming on the end of what it seems like forever, like 3 years of COVID before that and the aftermath of COVID. I think we finally have COVID in the rearview mirror. Hopefully there's not another big epidemic or pandemic coming. So that's all the good news. But I think we're at a moment where we'll look back on it, and we're getting to on the cusp of the fundamental economics of being able to develop assisted living and come anything close to a middle market price point. And really, you got to look at home sales and net worth more than income, because who has $100,000 a year to spend on their loved one? By 2027, I think we are going to be, frankly, in sort of a demand crisis. And it's really going to be about how well can you operate. There'll be places that aren't full, that are having operational problems, but it just puts the onus on us to do an excellent job because the demand's going to be there.
Well, you've given us not only a brief history, dropped some incredible names. There's so many stories to unpack there. We don't have enough time in the day, but I'm curious. So what you're saying, where do you see yourself positioning in all that? I mean, you've accomplished so much, but there's no way you can be done yet. I mean, what do you want to, where are you positioning yourself and Pegasus and all this?
Well, we're doing some acquisitions. We just took over. The brand name is Legacy. The ownership group is Lifewell. They sort of use both those brands. They have 8 buildings, 7 in Texas, 1 in New Mexico. I've known them for years. In a strange bit of serendipity or coincidence, or like the Truman Show, one of the owners came and did my zip line in New Zealand. I happened to be there. If I'd have been there 5 minutes later, I never would have met him. So I got it. He said, "Oh, I'm in assisted living." I go, "What?" I mean, that's mainly what I do. And so I went to Houston like 2017 and kind of consulted with them for a day, and have just stayed in touch with them. And, 8's kind of a tough number with the clinical demands now of the business. And we were fortunate enough to earn their trust to get the management contract starting September 1. Great buildings. We're very, very excited about native Texas, and we want to get more dense in our home region of Texas. So now we'll have about 16 buildings in Texas, including New Mexico. One of the things they do that's cool, just as a segue, is that we went to the one in Lubbock, and they have these beautiful courtyards, and there was a pair of glasses, like black glasses, sitting on the end of sculptures, like 8 feet high. Yeah. I'm like, what in the hell is that? It's Buddy Holly. So they were doing it as an ode to Buddy Holly, who's a Lubbock native, and they had a Buddy Holly mural. They had a guitar. They'd had a guy who played with Buddy Holly as a resident. So everywhere we went in El Paso, they had a miner's pick. And, it's just cool. I think it's so cool when you have those local touches. And I just applaud them because they were new to the sector. But, these are local businesses. And the more you can connect, and, what we're doing in Houston is making it a space thing, Space City. We've got NASA memorabilia. And so that's the fun part of the business, is to try to do that. But, I do think the window on acquisitions is going to close. I mean, we bought 4 others at a very low price in Texas. But that's the initial couple of years. After that, I don't know. I mean, I would like to develop. I just think it's getting harder to get it to pencil.
Yeah,
I really do. So, I mean, we have some ideas. We're working on some things from a feasibility standpoint, but we've also been trying very hard just to make sure we do the best we can for Welltower and our other capital partners.
Well, I mean, I look forward to, and I know our listeners do too, following you, because, I think back to just some of the stories you were telling, what you were doing in the 90s as a pioneer, even in, like, you were talking about memory care. Well, I remember I didn't arrive in the industry till 2005. And of course, we were doing memory care and we thought we were pioneering it. You were doing it 10 years before. But that leads me to think, okay, so you're kind of seeing the 2027 and all that will happen if we use that year as a marker. But do you think the product that we're trying to develop, or that we're envisioning now, and you see all these people pivoting to active adult, is that product even going to be relevant in 2027? Or are we going to have to radically change the communities that to live out and, you can still make music as Willie Nelson and all that. Is that going to be something that really happens in our communities? Are we going to be that, or are we just going to be care for the sickest of the population?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, I think there's always going to be a demand for high quality care, right? And what I do, I'm in the care business, assisted living and memory care. It's hard to live at home. I'm still fundamentally believe in the proposition that we're better than home health, because you go in for an hour, you're not socialized. We're not 100% sure you're not taking the meds after we leave, or you can fall by yourself. The way I went through this journey with my mom for 2 years, she needed assisted living. She wouldn't go, like pulling her out, it's like absolutely need a crowbar to get her out of that little home in Wills Point, Texas. I think of it as hardware and software. And now look, we run a lot of older buildings, right? But Welltower, I mean, we fixed them up. They're beautiful. I'm proud of them. They're a little homey. It was actually refreshing, a little jealous going into the life well, that I felt kind of like somebody driving an old car, getting in a brand new, like, wow, yeah, that's pretty swank. Look what they got. But we have fixed them up to where they show for what they are very well. And that at the end of the day, it's the software. You're coming, I go to a lot of restaurants. The mansion in Dallas is a 120-year-old building. People aren't there for the age of the building. They're there for the food, and people come to us for the care. I think there's going to be exciting things happening on the independent living side. I think, people don't go to church as much anymore. People have other affiliations, whether it's motorcycles or music. I think there'll be ideas of people congregating, or even, I think the baby boomers and after are going to want to have more control, less of a one size fits all. I have tried to pencil out ideas on that. I will tell you this, everywhere we put cottages next to assisted living, they fill up.
Yes.
I mean, we have cottages in Bellingham, Washington. It's like $4,000 and they're all full. And I'm like, well, what is a 2-bedroom apartment in Bellingham? They're like $2,000. I'm like, well, then why are they paying $4,000? Because it's the airbag effect. They don't want the airbag to go off, but they know it's there. They know they have the care right there when they need it. And at the holidays in particular, but they come over and have meals with it. So if people are yearning for a sense of community, there's a loneliness epidemic in this country, in modern life in general. COVID made that worse. I really think life enrichment is something we need to do a better job of. I just have such a passion for trying to, our mission statement is to celebrate and enhance all lives with kindness and integrity. And every one of those words is important. And trying to, the food, people are always going to complain about the food. It has to be not bad. It has to be good. If it's great, that's great. But the life enrichment and making sure people aren't lonely. I mean, we're doing this move-in procedure now. We're testing it. I want to roll it out everywhere. Where, if Lucas's mom moves in, we do a survey. We got a lady call and say to the family, and they really appreciate, like we can learn something from other industries. Car dealerships do this, right? It's not a new concept. Do it on a 1 to 5. Let's start rating this, because sometimes you lose people. You lose them after 2 weeks. If they don't connect, they can vote with their feet. And I want to make sure we make people happy and that they have somebody to sit with at lunch, aren't eating alone. How sad is that, that you're 87 and you're lonely and you're eating alone, so there's a lot of things to do better. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of new ideas, but at some point I need young guys like you to come do it too.
Well, thank you for calling me young. You're my best friend. And I'll also say, Lucas, what's fascinating is I'm sitting here and I use the word fascinating. Our production team hates when I say that because I say it too much, but this truly is fascinating. We're talking to a hero in the industry that's been so successful, but we're still talking about good care. It doesn't go out of style. And we're talking about the quality of our operations. It doesn't go out of style, and it's a challenge that we'll never fully solve, but that's our North Star. And, I know for a lot of our listeners, we're following you. So keep putting out content. We're going to try to, as many times as we can, grab you to share the wealth of not only the history of what you've accomplished, but what you see, because you have pioneered things. I think all of us are trying to figure out what's next, how to position our platforms. We're all a little different. There is going to be a huge wave that's coming that we're preparing for. And so I appreciate you sharing. What a wealth of information for our listeners, for you to take time for us at Nick. It's awesome.
Thank you guys, Josh. Thank you, Lucas. It's a pleasure to be here. And just keep doing what you're doing as well. And you guys are thought leaders, and it's a pleasure to be here.
So final remarks, because your daughter now, you have kind of arm wrestled her into the business. She's a great marketing journalism writer, very creative, super smart. And I've had a chance to meet her and talk to her about her experience of coming out of a big kind of corporate media and into the senior living industry. And just the look on her face of how proud she is of you and what you've done and her experiences inside your communities and her genuine love for it has been really unique. And she's so young. There's a lot of young people that are looking for fulfilling careers. And yes, they can go to a big corporation and climb the ladder, and that's totally fine. But there's a lot of opportunity here. As you interact with young people and you're recruiting and trying to find new talent into the industry, what do you tell them?
I don't think you can tell them, Lucas. I think you got to show them. If you can get them in the building for a day, to have a meal or go meet some folks. We used to do this thing in Southern Assisted Living, and Lucas talked about my daughter, Katie. And my other daughter, Lauren, was with the company, and she's gone into library field now. But we used to do what we called Generations Fair. We'd raise money, usually for local Girl Scouts. And my girls would come, and, at first they'd see these old people, and it's like it was another species. They were scared of them. They looked different. And I said, no, you can just go talk to them. And then you would have these Girl Scouts, and my daughters included that were both Girl Scouts. They'd go up and just start talking. And we had walking programs with these older people. So I think the younger we can get people involved, a lot of people that you find in our communities, they have a personal story, and I'm sure you guys do as well, of a grandparent they helped, or they went in and started working in a community when they were in high school. And now they're 40 and that's all they've ever done. I call it the Hotel California. You check in, but you don't check out. I go around and I say, well, there's Tom Grave, there's Lynn Katzman. We're all going to stay. And one day we'll just go to our room, I guess. Just walk in one day. Well, I'm not the president anymore. I'm a resident. So I'll just go to my room and volunteer because it is fun. But I think you really got to show people. They got to get a bit of a taste of it. Otherwise, they're scared of it. Oh, that's a scary place. Why would you work in a nursing home, right? And by the way, nursing home people have a lot of good people, too. They just have an incredibly hard job trying to take care of the sickness of the sick. So,
well, I appreciate that. We love these conversations and appreciate you taking time here at Nick. We're going to get you back to your busy schedule. And I know you have a kind of a team event tonight and kind of a gathering, networking. To our listeners, I know you're going to want to connect and look into Pegasus and see what Chris and his team are doing. We'll put that in the show notes right down at the bottom of your podcast player. You can go to btgvoice.com, connect on this content and so much more. Thanks to Nick for being great media partners with Bridge the Gap so we can bring all this great content and good information and conversations to you. And thanks for listening to another great episode of Bridge the Gap.
Thanks for listening to Bridge the Gap podcast with Josh and Lucas. Connect with the BTG Network team and use your voice to influence the industry by connecting with us at btgvoice.com.